On today's bonus episode of Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, I have Jacksonville Jaguars Chief Football Strategy Officer and All Elite Wrestling owner and CEO Tony Khan, the son of Shah Khan, to talk about being in the war room during the 2024 NFL Draft, analytics, Trevor Lawrence, all that and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. On this bonus episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, I have Jacksonville Jaguars Chief Football Strategy Officer and All Elite Wrestling CEO and owner Tony Khan to come and join me on the show. We're talking all things Jacksonville Jaguars, the draft room, war room, selecting Brian Thomas in the first round, their strategy, how analytics helps them dive deep into roster building and building through the draft, so forth and so on, and even talking about AEW itself. But before we get into all of that, today's episode has been brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And again, let's get started and let's talk to Tony Khan from the Jaguars and All Elite Wrestling. As promised, we have a special guest on today's episode of Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, the Chief Football Strategy Officer and the owner and the CEO of All Elite Wrestling, Tony Khan. Tony, thank you for your time today, man.
Thanks for having me on, Damian. It's great to see you.
Always. Definitely had a good time talking with you down at the Senior Bowl and to have you on the show to kind of get into a little bit of the Jaguars draft and their the draft room. You guys, being on the board round one, with different, needs on kind of on the board for you, around one of in the 2024 NFL Draft, to move back and still be able to get a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. in round one. Was he always the target for your Jaguars?
Yeah, I think Brian Thomas was a player that Trent and our scouts and all of us had identified early is going to be a really, really good addition for the Jaguars. I think what worked out incredibly well was we were able to make a trade, move back in the draft, get more picks this year and in next year's draft, and still get the player we all really wanted with Brian Thomas Jr. It's an excellent, excellent prospect. I think we're bringing in a top wide receiver. When you look at his downfield receiving metrics, he was definitely one of the best deep threats in all of college football. And we're really excited to have Brian in Jacksonville playing with Trevor.
Man, and speaking of Trevor, I live in the Carolinas. I watched him his whole entire career at Clemson. And one thing I consistently said ever since you guys drafted him, I said, man, if they can get him that big body, explosive vertical receiver like he had with T. Higgins and Justin Ross and all those different guys at Clemson, that's when I felt like Trevor was really going to be able to take that next step, because with his arm talent and everything that he brings to the table, deep passing ability, I was excited when I saw the name Brian Thomas Jr. come across the screen, because I was like, this is almost, to me, an ideal fit with the things that you guys have done already offensively, with Travis Etienne, bringing, having Christian Kirk, bringing in Gabe Davis and everything, and then adding a Brian Thomas Jr. I felt like that was going to be just that icing on the top of the cake, right? That cherry on top to really help this offense take that next step going forward. And for you were in, and a lot of people who watched the broadcast saw you had a neck brace on. You had an unfortunate situation on AEW where you were unfairly targeted by a couple guys. Kind of talk to us about that, of how that mentality and what you set, that precedent you set for the players to never miss work no matter what's going on.
Well, I think it's really important to know we had a great NFL draft, and during that week, I was also attacked in AEW in Jacksonville. What a busy week it was, and a crazy week. On Wednesday night, the night before the draft, we had AEW Dynamite live on TBS. Just like every week, we're on Wednesday nights on TBS, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central every week, coming up on our 5-year anniversary. It's pretty amazing. And the night before the draft, we did the show in Jacksonville at Daly's Place. And should have been a great celebration. Instead, I was attacked by the executive vice presidents of AEW in a power play, an attempt to grab all the power at the top of AEW. And I received one of the deadliest, most dangerous moves in all of pro wrestling, the spike pile driver. I'm not a professional wrestler. The professional wrestlers in AEW are the best in the world. They're the greatest athletes. What they do is amazing. And I was not built to take the spike pile driver. I went down hard, and I was grateful I was able to keep working through the week in a neck brace. I was wearing the neck brace in the NFL draft, and the big silver lining was it got a lot of really positive press in the community of the NFL, which was awesome. It's the most powerful media enterprise in the world is the National Football League. And to have the machine of the NFL behind you and on the NFL draft, which is being watched all over the world, to have them talking about AEW, that was pretty cool. And Rich Eisen, the host of the NFL draft for many years and the great voice of the NFL, Rich brought it up round after round every time they went back to our draft room. I was sitting there with Trent Baalke, our GM, my dad also, and Doug Peterson, the coach of the Jaguars. And the four of us were sitting there talking, and they picked up a lot of our conversations, me and the neck brace. And it got a lot of publicity. It did really well for us. And it came full circle because we recently did AEW at the Los Angeles Forum on Wednesday Night Dynamite. And the morning of the show, before I went into the office for the show, I stopped by Rich Eisen. I was on his show, and Rich Eisen had asked me to donate that neck brace and auction it off for charity. And I came in with a winning bid right away. I donated $100,000 to St. Jude and Run Rich Run, the great Rich Eisen 40-yard dash charity on behalf of AEW, All Elite Wrestling, and our great shows on TBS and TNT. And that neck brace now has been immortalized. It lives on. It's on the bust of Rich Eisen at the Rich Eisen show. So that's pretty cool.
No, 100%. It was a fascinating to see how, just kind of you turn such a potential negative thing into such a positive thing. The power of Tony Khan. I love it. Tony, let's talk about it. With your role with the Jaguars, right? Your dad being the owner and you being the chief football strategy officer. Kind of tell the listeners and the fans what comes with your role with the Jaguars.
Well, I've been there 13 years. When I came in, we started an analytics department. In 2012, the Jaguars had not started an analytics group yet. It was a movement that was really growing in sports, and the analysis of the plays, there's a big misconception, and I think a lot of people throw the word analytics in football around, but it's really researching the information, what happens on the plays, the personnel, and for preparing for games and for big events like the draft or free agency, it can be really useful to do that kind of research. So it's really football research, and that is something that the Jaguars really needed to grow. And in 2012, I came in at the start of the season and launched that department. And around that time also, I got involved with a company called True Media Networks out of Boston. I invested in it, and then I bought it outright the following year. And for about 10 years now, I've owned and operated True Media along with the CEO, Rafe Anderson, and our Chief Technology Officer, Jeff Stern, the original founders. And the three of us have grown the business to be the largest and best sports analytics engineering firm in the country for all sports research engineering. And for the data feeds, we work with the NFL, we work with ESPN, and with 26 out of the 30 Major League Baseball clubs, and a lot of great media partners doing that research. So it's something I really believe in, and have been able to launch a big business outside of the Jaguars in that space. And, for sports analytics and for people who love data and football, our company's called True Media, TRU Media. There's only one E in True Media. It's in the media, not the true. And it's a great business, and I've been able to grow that and also utilize a lot of that information at the Jaguars. And it's great having a GM like Trent Baalke, who had formerly been the GM of the San Francisco 49ers. I've known Trent for 12 years. I've been friends with Trent a long time, long before he worked for the Jaguars. And he does a great job. And also, he really believes in the information. And when he was at San Francisco, they utilized a lot of the data in the decision-making, and he's been the same way at the Jaguars. I've seen Trent making these great trades. It's great been by his side when he's made these awesome trades the last couple of years and stacked up picks. And it's been a great, great strategy. He got the players that we wanted 2 years in a row in the first round and made multiple trades back to get multiple picks across several years. And I think that's a great strategy. We get more players in. For everyone who loves Locked On, the NFL draft, and people who really follow the draft closely. I mean, once we really get into it, February, March, and April, we're talking so deep in the draft, and we're talking, a few hundred players we all know very well by then. And it's kind of crazy because those draft picks, I mean, those are third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round picks, and those are good players. And it's been a really effective strategy, I think, for Trent and the Jags to keep stacking up picks, bringing in young talent to build around. We have a franchise quarterback, and we have a great coach in Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning head coach. And those are the hardest things to get in football, in my opinion, are the franchise quarterback and one of the top coaches in the sport. We have those things in Jacksonville, and we now have some of the best facilities in the NFL. We've upgraded the practice and the training facilities. We've gone from, in my opinion, when we got here, having probably the worst facilities when my dad bought the Jaguars in the NFL to what he and the team have been able to build, and the city of Jacksonville has been really supportive too. We recently built the Miller Electric Center with the city of Jacksonville, and that's our new office and practice facility. All the training and all the scouting work goes on there, and all the team meetings, and it's a great office. And frankly, none of us had windows for many years. We were a windowless office in the bowels of Everbank Stadium, and we called it the Submarine, and we have really nice offices now too, so it's pretty cool living in Jacksonville right now.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and so much more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, guys, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 at your disposal that you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the ballpark. Guys, on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, you can get in on the early betting odds for who's going to win the NCAA National Championship of 2024. Ole Miss is right now a dark horse at plus 1,500, while Georgia is plus 300 as the favorite. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Oh, no, 100%. And you talked about your quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, former first overall pick. And, just last week, you guys were able to ink him to a big deal, a nice long-term extension for the talent that he is. How important was that contract extension for the franchise, especially, like you said, be able to draft the way you guys have been able to draft over the past couple of years, getting like Trayvon Walker, bringing in, Brian Thomas Jr., Mason Smith, and all the different guys that you were able to acquire through the draft with trading and multiple picks. How important was it to get Trevor Lawrence inked into that contract extension?
It's very important for us, and it's great news for the Jags fans and everybody at the Jaguars organization that we got Trevor Lawrence locked into a great contract, to have a top quarterback, a top young quarterback, and somebody that is really a face of the Jaguars, and we all love working with him. I think Trevor's tremendous and just an absolute pleasure to work with day in and day out. Everybody really respects him. He's a great leader. He's a great person, a great leader on and off the field, and we're very blessed to have Trevor in Jacksonville now for a long time to come too.
100%. And you talked about the analytics, and one thing, like being in the draft space and the football space, Tony, that's always been a big component and talking point is analytics, film. I always believe in, listen, you can't have a good match without two good partners. And when you have, being able to watch tape like your scouts do, as your coaches do, but then have the analytics part that so much in depth about, to be able to marry those in, how does that analytics part help you guys make some of the decisions and in the draft that you've been able to make, the Trayvon Walkers, the Jerry and Jones that you're able to grab, I think round 3 this year, back in April, the cornerback out of Florida State. How important is the analytics part to it to helping you build the right roster around your star quarterback?
I think it's a huge part of it, and it's only going to go as far as the people at the top of the organization. And we're really blessed to have a general manager in Trent and a head coach in Doug who've worked at other teams in those positions and have been big believers in analytics. You know, at San Francisco, Trent's personnel department, and in Philadelphia, Doug's football team really utilize analytics in the decision making. Doug's been a very aggressive and intelligent head football coach, and Trent's made a lot of decisions using information. So when we're going through the draft and decision making process, absolutely, we're looking at the numbers a lot. We have literally hundreds of data points on every player that we track and try to summarize that information, make it digestible. And Trent spends so much time watching the players. I mean, he's a real football grinder. And when you have somebody like that that has that kind of work ethic and also believes in the information, and it is not just watching the tapes, but also is looking at the data and trying to make smart decisions, I think that's been really great for us. So I love working with Doug and Trent.
No, that's awesome, man. Trent's always been, you know, for a lot of people in the draft space knows him as kind of the toolsy guy. He loves the players that's going to check the certain height, weight, and arm length and athleticism metrics. And, you know, I remember a couple years ago, you know, when you drafted Trayvon Walker, a lot of people scratched their head. They were confused by it. And I always believe, hey, give it time. And we saw in 2023, you know, that the step forward that Trayvon was able to make, those tools that Trent Baalke absolutely loved and appreciated, we start to see those really start to come to fruition on the field with, I think, 9 sacks, double-digit pressures and hurries, just hits on the quarterback. He's developing, and that's why, for me, I love what Trent has been able to do. And when Brian Thomas Jr. was the pick, I was not surprised at all, because I was like, this is a Trent Baalke pick 100%. He's tall, he's athletic, he's fast. I remember talking to a guy, one of my guys from LSU, and he just told me, he said, man, and this is for the Jaguars fans, I don't think I ever said this on this pod. My guy told me, he said, listen, only receiver I would have taken over Brian Thomas Jr. would have been Marvin Harrison Jr. And the type of praise that, you know, that was, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. being the belle of the ball at the wide receiver position in the 2024 NFL draft, to have someone on staff say, listen, this guy is a freak of nature. He does things that a guy his size shouldn't be able to do. I'm really excited again to see him, you know, in that uniform, preseason, regular season, getting that chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. But I want to transition a little bit, right? You know, like I said, you being the CEO and owner of AEW, before launching it, how long has it been in the works, especially with you being so much of an integral part to the Jaguars front office?
It's something I started working on in 2018. It kind of came to me, the idea to launch AEW. A lot of things came together, and I believe there were enough great wrestlers that would be available in the beginning of 2019 to launch a wrestling league. So in April of 2018, I started working on this. I was at a party in Beverly Hills on a Friday night, and I saw my friend, who at the time was the president of TBS and TNT. And I walked up to him, and I was visiting with him for a little bit. And I said, Kevin, are you looking at bidding on wrestling TV rights? And he was looking at bidding on SmackDown. And he told me what he was willing to pay. And he said 150 to 175 million a year. And I knew that I followed the industry really closely. So I knew that it was actually going to probably go over 200 million, and it did. And I pointed out, you know, I don't know if that's actually going to get it done, but also for a lot less than that, we could launch a new wrestling league on TNT and eventually TBS too. And that's what happened. We premiered on TNT, and now we're also on Wednesdays on TBS, and we do every weekend on TNT, Fridays and Saturdays. And it's grown so much, and that was crazy to think. It was over 6 years ago I had that conversation, and it's grown into being AEW now. We've been around 5 years, and a very, very special thing we do. And a lot of the shows are in Jacksonville, and our offices for AEW are in Jacksonville. So it's a really great thing we've been able to bring to the Jaguars community too. We've had a lot of fun, had some of the Jaguar staff and people involved at times in the matches and the shows. Josh Allen has come over and visited us before. And I actually got to introduce Josh Allen to my good friend. He would have been great in the NFL, but instead he just went on to become one of the all-time greats in the NBA, Shaq. We had Shaquille O'Neal wrestle in AEW. Shaq is undefeated in AEW, in fact. And he carries that undefeated record. And he's one of the most recognizable people in the world. He's also one of the nicest people in the world. I'm very, very blessed to know Shaq. And he's an inspiration to me and a lot of other people. And having Shaq be in AEW was probably one of the greatest moments ever. And especially that Shaq came and wrestled in Jacksonville. It was awesome. And we've had a lot of great moments, a lot of great things. And we get to do it every Wednesday night, including this week. We're going to have a big stack show in Fairfax, Virginia on Wednesday night. And then we're coming to Allentown, Pennsylvania for Collision this weekend on TNT.
I love to hear that. Any nuggets that we need to be paying attention to? It is Forbidden Door season, right? You know, we have Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland. Swerve's my guy. Got a lot of love for Swerve as the AEW World Heavyweight Champion. Any nuggets that we need to be paying attention to during the Dynamite and Collision this week?
A lot to watch. There's so many exciting things happening in AEW. We're going to have those two, the AEW World Champion Swerve Strickland and the AEW International Champion Will Ospreay coming face to face. It's going to be awesome. They are going to wrestle coming up in a few weeks at AEW New Japan Forbidden Door. We bring in the best wrestlers in the world. It's a co-promotion between AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. This year it's coming to UBS Arena in New York. We're going to have a great show, and this Wednesday night you'll see Swerve and Ospreay face to face. And speaking of that UBS Arena and that area around Long Island, New York, probably one of the all-time greats to come out of there, and I think one of the greatest wrestlers certainly in the world right now, MJF, the former AEW World Champion. He has not wrestled on television in 7 months. And for the first time all year, we're going to see MJF wrestling on AEW Dynamite. He hasn't wrestled in AEW at all. And finally, MJF returns to the ring for the first time since last year. This week, Wednesday Night Dynamite, we're going to kick off the show with MJF versus truly one of the most dangerous dudes in all of pro wrestling. You mess with the bull, you get the horns. His name is Roosh, and he is scary. And he's wrestling MJF. I would not want to be MJF on Wednesday night. That kicks off the show. So we're going to start out hot with MJF versus Ospreay. We got Swerve and Will Ospreay face to face, and so much more coming up on Wednesday on TBS.
Can't wait to check it out. And I wanted to ask you, last two questions for you, and I'll get you out of here. For you, your experience being in the NFL front office, right? Seeing the GMs, the Trent Baalke's, watching your dad do business, you helping alongside. How does that help you in terms of attacking your own free agency, right? When wrestlers from other promotions, their contract ends, just like a player from a team in the NFL. So you know what? This guy would be a very big addition and a helpful addition to our roster. How does that experience in the NFL front office help you on your own job with your own company?
Well, it's a great question, Damian. I love working in football here in the NFL. Also, I'm the general manager of Fulham Football Club in the Premier League. So I have a lot of great experience working with football players, their contracts and leagues and media partners. I think it's really helped me a lot negotiating the media deals and having those big relationships here in America with all the big networks, with the NFL, and also in England. We work with ITV, the biggest commercial channel in England, and we built AEW into the number one wrestling company in England. And that would not have been possible without my experiences in London at Fulham Football Club, and also with the Jaguars playing every year at Wembley Stadium in London. Now we're bringing AEW to Wembley Stadium for the second time. We set the world record last year for ticket sales at Wembley Stadium. World record for ticket sales anywhere in wrestling, in fact. 81,000 tickets sold. A new record, 81,035 exactly. And it was a great experience. We're going back August 25th, AEW All In, back at Wembley Stadium. That's a relationship, and those experiences at Wembley I would not have had without my time in football. So a lot of great things have come, and definitely when it comes to managing a roster, free agency, contracts, all those things, that's stuff you learn about in football. But there's also a lot of differences in wrestling and football.
Absolutely. And my last question for you, Tony, you have so many talented and athletically gifted wrestlers on your roster. We talked about Swerve, Will Ospreay, the man who almost defies gravity himself, also Pac. Anybody, all the guys that you have on your roster, do you think any of them would be able to make the Jacksonville Jaguars practice squad? I'm not even going to say the 53-man roster, because that's a tough ask. But do you think any of them could be able to walk in with the right training and make the practice squad?
That's a great question. It's very, very hard to say. I think, when you look back at the history of it, some of my guys do have football experience, but I don't know if any pro wrestler who hasn't been playing football actively year in, year out would be able to go and compete in an NFL practice week in, week out. It would be very challenging. We've seen people try to make the leap before, and I do think, for the very best athletes in wrestling, and wrestling has a lot of the top athletes in sports, I would never say never, but I think it'll be really hard, very challenging, because unless you are working on football every day and practicing year in, year out football, it's tough to jump back and forth between sports when you're playing.
100%. I agree with you. Like I said, I look at Will Ospreay. I said, man, Will would be an outstanding receiver if he had some time to train. His athleticism, his explosiveness, his leaping ability, and the body control that just defies all logic. The things he's able to do, swerve, pack. Man, like you have such a stacked roster, Tony. You've done a great job. I appreciate the time. And like Tony, guys, listen, like Tony said, you got AEW Dynamite this Wednesday. You got AEW Collision this Saturday. We also got Rampage later this week. And do not forget about AEW New Japan Wrestling, Forbidden Door in just a couple of weeks that you can get on pay-per-view. Tony, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Thank you, Damian. I really enjoyed visiting with you. You have a great show, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. If not, I'll definitely see you at the Senior Bowl, sir.
Oh, listen, you guys are coming to where I live July 31st for my birthday, so I plan on being in town. You going to be in town? I plan on coming out to the show.
100%. I'll see you there. We'll make sure to hook you up, too. I can't wait to see you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, that was our sit down. That was my sit down with Jaguars Chief Football Strategy Officer and All Elite Wrestling CEO and owner, Tony Khan. We got into Trevor Lawrence's contract and the importance of getting that franchise quarterback, their first round pick, Brian Thomas Jr. Talked about a little bit how the Jaguars use analytics and what he has brought to that front office and to that team's mentality to build their roster, to build through the draft, and how Trent Baalke uses it as well and everything. And of course, being able to promote his company, All Elite Wrestling. So guys, listen, go check all of that out. But as always, you already know what to do here. Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.